Peculiars. It is so nice to see all of you here. And I have a little friend in my lap here, as you might see. I thought it was probably time for us to introduce Wallace to the rest of the Peculiars, but he's very busy purring and hiding his head in my elbow. So he'll be with us this evening. Davy, I know you have other charges that you've been taking care of.
Yeah. If you hear any beeps, squeaks, coos, or outright screams and
Hiccups.
cries, there might be some babies just to the side of me over here. Now you've teased them. Now the Peculiars are going to request Wallace Cam, where we have just a specific box and a camera on
True.
Wallace all
and,
episode.
and you know he's Wallace is Darwin's very active adventure cat. Wallace is armpit cat, basically armpit lap. He's purring so loud. I've actually intentionally pointed the mic away from him because he's really loud. But yeah, and everyone's here and everyone's excited. And I have seen, yes, there's several people saying hello to Wallace. If you followed his extraordinary saga on Instagram and Facebook, he's been through a lot to get here. Mike is here, by the way. Mike Breen, you have been away for so long. It's so good to see you. He says, from the show description, you are made of actual bang dust is one of my favorite sentences ever.
Oh, I took some notes on favorite lines. I think fudge factor definitely needs to be a flavor of ice cream like that. I thought about doing a sketch where I made my own homemade fudge factor ice cream.
Yeah, I kind of like that. Well, Mike Breen asked about Wallace. Wallace's name, he's not named after Wallace and Gromit. So because Darwin is named after Charles Darwin, and they started life as kind of companion frenemies. Now they're enemies to friends to lovers. I don't know. We named him Alfred Wallace. So Alfred Wallace being I'm super nerd. If you look it up, you'll see why Alfred Wallace and Charles Darwin might have been frenemies. So anyway, yes, he's going to be with us for the show. We have lots of people excited about the book that we're doing tonight, and I think, without further ado, I will go back up and look for these amazing comments about the book while we introduce our author, Dan Levitt. I love a good ink explosion. Yeah. Hello, Dan.
Hey there, how are you?
I'm good. Welcome. People are so excited. I've been already following the comments from earlier in our show. People are saying, I loved this book. Kristen Meston saying it's taken all the things she's studied and read about over the years and connected them in a way that finally made sense to her. Such good writing and teaching. Oh. I know Lexi said something about this too. Where'd you go, Lexi? I absolutely loved this book. I love how he put it all of the sciences together. And
I thought you were talking about this. Lexi wants to run up to Ben and Jerry's with me and get some fudge factor.
Of course. Well, that makes sense to me too. And Leanne Weiberg says, "Hi, Dan." Leanne Weiberg, who is our she runs our Facebook group and is also one of the people who helps us keep track of what all the authors are doing in between times of not being on the show. This book was so much fun, and I have to ask, there's so many things it could have been called. So what's gotten into you? What spurred that title? What gave you the idea for that?
Well, I had a lot of help, actually. I was going to call it something that was kind of lame, which was, "What are you made of?" And my agent said, "Well, we have to come up with something better than that." So I brainstormed a lot of titles, and then I sat down with my kid who was in college, and he came up with that phrase. Although it turns out I just yesterday got a draft of a cover. It's going to be translated into a number of languages, including Portuguese. And apparently what's got it into you in Portuguese is like a no-no. You don't say that. So they actually changed it to "What are you made of?" I didn't even give them the idea, but that's what they came up with. That's right.
I like it. What makes you tick? I think that's, I keep calling it "What's got into you?" And I'm sorry, that just comes from my Appalachian roots, because we don't finish the whole word. And we got "what's got in you."
I like it. I like that one too.
Yeah, Christian says it sounds like a phrase that a teen young adult would hear. Yeah, totally agree.
That's right.
Sharon Roney said she needs to now add another book to her emotional support bedside book stack. I actually met Sharon in person while doing a book signing last weekend. Time flies. Let's see what else we got here. Amanda Johnson said that she only made it a quarter way through the book, the audiobook, and then the library yanked it back. So now she's got to put the rehold back on.
I just returned it, so it's there. It's available for you now.
It's available. It's out there. I've seen a couple of questions come through. Davey, are you keeping track of those? I'm sorry, I've got a cat in one arm.
Of course. I think Kristen had our first first official question.
All right. We'll take a question, then we're going to do announcements because I always forget to do announcements. But so her question is: I loved the framing of some of the scientific non-progress. I love that. As the 6 biases. How did you decide to use that conceit, and have you thought of any other biases since?
Oh, that's a great question. So I honestly never thought about scientific biases at all until I was writing this book. And I kept finding over and over again, because I wanted to tell the stories of discoveries through the eyes of the scientists and then the reactions of people around them. And over again, everybody said, no, that's rubbish. No way, that's ridiculous. That's just crazy. And so by the time I got to the end of the first draft, I started scratching my head and saying, this is nuts. Why is this? So I went back and tried to analyze all the times that this happened. And that's when I came up with, these biases that I've, named, like the too weird to be true, or the as an expert, I've forgotten how much I don't know. Now, I haven't found any new ones because I was really just applying it to the cases in this book that I happen to write about. But I have been doing a fair amount of thinking about it since I wrote the book. And I read Danny Kahneman's Thinking Fast, Thinking Slow, and I think you could argue that most of them are some subsets of 2 of his biases. One of them is you look for theories that match what you already know, and the other one, it's the confirmation bias. It was slipping my tongue, right? And the other is the availability bias, which is kind of, if you can't think of it, then it's not, or it's hard to think of, then you'll discard that. So it's not like I came up with completely different things that other people haven't talked about, but I did kind of identify in science, some of the subsets that come up all the time.
Yeah. Well, and it's funny too, because I think that, sorry, I'm being chewed on. You guys can't see this on screen. He's decided that it's playtime now. I think bias inside, we understand people are biased against science. We don't think about the fact that there's biases within. I'm going to put you down, you little chew box. We don't think about the fact that there's biases also within and between and all of those other things. So it's a fascinating point. And the interconnectedness of everything. I have to say that's probably my favorite part of the book, is just how, it's not that I don't know things are connected, but when you really see them woven together like that. Right, chef's kiss.
Yeah, that I just wanted to say, for me as a writer, that was the fun, was to see all the connections and draw them out, and hopefully other people will see them too, because you never learn about it in school like that, or I really enjoyed
that. Would be awesome. I think connectivity is so much fun, and so it has so many, you get all these aha moments. I don't know why that we don't do more true interdisciplinary teaching actually at a younger age, because to me that's where the fun's at, because the intersections where everything gets wild and crazy, right?
Yeah.
So we've got a couple more questions coming in. Unfortunately, the questions come in a little slow. It's just the nature of the beast. So guys, keep typing and putting them in there, and we will go to announcements so that I don't forget them again, like I so often do. I'm also wearing a math joke t-shirt, by the way. This is how I roll. For our announcements, we started this slide because, guys, we're everywhere now. So there's a Facebook page, a Facebook group, there's Twitter, we have a Discord, there's bookclub.com, there's Goodreads. I know they're all up there. We're everywhere. And we have the podcast. We're going to get back to that. Davey and I have actually been adding some really cool extra content to the audio podcast. It's not part of the video content, so we'll get to that too. Don't forget that you want to be on the live chat if you're on YouTube, so that way you can ask questions in real time and respond in real time and have random conversations in real time, as we so often do. And next, we have the Peculiar newsletter. Supposedly, I'm sort of hoping that if you're here, it's because you're already plugged into the newsletter. Do share that with people. It's how I get out the links, the live links to the show. So do subscribe today. Patreon and VIPs. Obviously, we do a drive once a year for the VIPs, but you can also join our Patreon at any time and get extra content. We had a little bit of, unfortunately, we were supposed to have Lindsay Fitzharris on as our first VIP content this year, and due to some extenuating circumstances, that didn't happen, trying to get her on for something else. But we do have some more coming up, and that's exciting. And coming up next, most exciting, our book cocktail. So this Kat is our drinks maven, and Kat, who's in Toronto, creates really interesting cocktails that are specifically for the author and the book. And this one, I actually made the virgin version of this one, which doesn't have the vodka, but it's very interesting. So it's limeade, grapefruit juice, chia seeds, and spirulina powder. So it's like this little floating atoms. So we were trying to do galaxy stuff and atoms floating, and it's green and it's lovely, and you need kind of a big straw. But this is our cocktail. And guess what? There was a running tie. So I don't actually, guys, who was last on Facebook? Which one won? It was Galaxy in the Glass and Bang Dust or something like that. Does anybody give me a sense of which one won over there?
Both very good names.
Yeah, they're both good names. They are both good names. So Galaxy in the Glass and Bang Dust.
I gotta say, the effect worked. That was impressive when we zoomed in on your camera there. That's
pretty cool, right?
I have to say, I am partial to Bang Dust. I think that is so good.
That might be the tiebreaker right there then.
I made mine with extra limeyness in the lime juice. And then I thought, well, I'll test it later if it needs sweetened up, but I never tested it later. So that's now also on the video, I will have probably chia seeds in my teeth, and now you all know why, right? It's not a brushing problem. Please do sign up and subscribe for our YouTube channel. That's where you're watching all this now, but all of our shows are up there. That every show we've done is up on our YouTube channel. You can go back, you can watch them again and again and see us talk about duck vaginas, which we did that like a lot one season for some reason. Oh, I should have made a GIF of that drink. You know what, Lexi? I'm not good at that. Somebody who knows how really ought to do that. Sadie said they're letting their chia bloom now. They use gin instead of vodka. Jennifer Pierce. Hi, friends. Why can't I remember to show up on time? Hi, Jennifer.
That's okay. We could barely remember to show up on time.
Yeah, you know what I mean? So, anyway, it's amazing and fun and great. And the last of our announcements has to do with our podcast.
Speaking of the podcast feed, yeah, so we do a companion piece, the Peculiar Book Club, obviously. We do the Peculiar Movie Club with my friend Darren Cross, and we try to find a movie that meets the themes of the books that we read. So, Dan, for your book, we thought we needed something that went inside the human body. And we went with the 1987 comedy Inner Space.
Love that word.
Starring, directed by Joe Dante, starring, Dennis Quaid, Martin Short, Meg Ryan. I remember this like very vividly from my childhood, but I can't say I've seen this movie since I was like 10 years old. So I think it still holds up. I think it's gonna be hilarious.
I thought I fever dreamed this movie. I wasn't even sure if it was really real. I was thinking about it the other day.
Yeah, I was trying to subscribe to Maggie what movie we're going to watch this weekend. And I was like, we get shrunken down and put inside Martin Short's body, but he's not supposed to be in Martin Short's body. And shenanigans ensue, as my co-host Darren would say. Do you feel like, after listening to your book, though, Dan, I got to say that we might miss the mark on themes. We will be inside the human body, but you went much more molecular. I think this is going to deal a lot more with organs and some bigger things in the human body than you went with. Have you ever seen it?
I thought it was a great movie.
I've never heard of it, but I can't wait to see a clip.
It's
There you go.
very Yeah,
It's funny. It's fun. It's a perfect 80s movie. Like it wouldn't have worked in other decades, but in the 80s, it's comedy gold. All right.
Susan, by the way, wanted to thank you, Davey. She says, thanks for watching Cocktails so we didn't have to.
I mean, it was fun. It was fun. You heard our conversation.
Thanks for mentioning Action Park, she said.
Oh my God, Action Park. Oh, there's some documentaries out there about Action Park. So it's like the guy who had an insurance company and created his own amusement park and insured it himself, and it was it's amazing the things that happen there, and terrifying.
Right. So anyway, those are our announcements. Welcome to all of you who are joining us a little bit later, perhaps, which is okay because we are just now getting into the meat and potatoes of our episode tonight. I have new questions, and I have my own questions too, but I will let the peculiars go first. Leanne asks, how did you develop a writing style that is so easily digestible? It's relatable and casual, distilling with analogies. And I agree because I've had to spend a lot of time de-academizing myself as as somebody who writes for the public. How did it all come about for you?
Well, you might detect a little bit of a documentary film style to it. I spent so many years doing films for Discovery Channel, National Geographic, Science Channel, and so on. And you got to write so that people are not going to change the channel, right? And you have to write in a way that people think like, oh, I get it. So I had a lot of experience doing that kind of writing. But this is my first book. I'm working on another one now, but I did have to, learn still a different style. But the one thing that I had a lot of practice with was really distilling things down. I mean, I cannot tell you how many times I have interviewed on camera scientists and historians and saying, that's great. Can you just tell me that in half as many words? Oh, that's great. Now, cut it down to half as many words again, right? So,
no, it's true. It's so true. Tell you what, I think, of course, I know about your documentaries. You've seen our promo video for the show, which I kind of snuck some of those in there. But the other thing too is I had to work in a medical museum where you had to turn everything into, an 8x5 card, like hey, please distill the entire history of this thing that you're talking about, and you do have to think about what people's uptake and also what their walking away language is going to be. What kind of words. And what's wonderful about your book, to jump in after Leanne's question, is just the imagery of each section. There's a nugget somewhere in there that you walk away with, that you think about later in the day. And I think that has to come. I mean, it's a very visual medium that you've been working on in documentaries, and that really translates, I think. I feel like I see what you're saying to us.
Well, that was my hope anyway. So I'm glad to hear that at least it worked to a certain extent.
It worked for peculiars, and that's all we care about, right? Like, we are all on your team. You are definitely in the right place. This is the right anecdote book club for you. I tell this to a lot of our authors. Like, speaking of our podcast, I just interviewed Davey. My mind just went blank. Help me out here.
I know. I'm working on the edits. They're coming out soon. I don't remember.
Who am I? Never mind.
It's one of the 10 podcasts. Yeah, one of the 10 podcasts I'm currently editing.
Anyway, I've just interviewed another one of our authors, and this is their second book as well. So also keep this in mind when you have second books, come back. But that being part of the Peculiar Book Club, you don't have to sell us. Like, we're already pretty well sold on what's going on by the time we get your book. It's pretty cool. So, Kristen, I like this kind of question a lot. How do you see the world differently after writing this book? And then in parentheses, I spent 20 minutes watching grains of pollen sliding down my car window yesterday and being amazed that they even exist. So do you have the same thing going on for you?
Absolutely. I mean, I wrote a lot of this book during the pandemic, so you had the terrible pandemic, and then there was the whole politics on top of it. And being able to just, get into the science and to a different space was really good for me psychologically. But what I did, which I'd never done before, is I looked at how you start with a big bang and those particles, 13.8 billion years later, end up making us. I mean, what a question. But when you start to really trace each of the steps and each of the lucky breaks and each of the crazy things that happened, you can look at it, the Himalayas and the mountains and think, oh my God, this instills awe. But that kind of journey of walking through the journey of our atoms, for me, it really instilled a lot of awe and just deeper appreciation of, the fact that we're actually here, which is just unbelievable. So,
so true. It's I mean, I think you translate that all for us so well. And like Lexi was saying, she says, "Oh yeah, that's why your name looks familiar." Discovery Channel and History Channel and all these other content.
yeah,
I was just watching a documentary myself, a new one, about all the times that Earth, like all the life on Earth, basically went extinct and had to
yeah,
start over again. And it's a
yeah,
similar kind of feeling where you just think, this shouldn't have worked. Like this shouldn't have worked.
right,
But
right.
also this wonderful idea that I'm just like stardust in a meat jacket, like is just amazing.
Yeah,
Hey, here we all are.
that's the crazy thing is, you had these stars, all these particles and atoms came out, and they made us. It's really hard to even wrap your head around.
It is.
Yeah,
I mean, it almost makes sense that they make diamonds and stuff, but it's just weird to think that they make Davy.
yeah, yeah. But I started to think. Sorry, yeah.
No, I was just gonna. I'm definitely naming my punk band "Stardust in a Meat Jacket."
Stardust in it. I can almost imagine the songs that you'd be singing.
Exactly right.
Yeah.
High concept album. Sorry, go ahead.
But I also started to think about the book in terms of the stages of matter in the universe, because you had the Big Bang and you had subatomic particles and hydrogen and helium. Then you had stars, and out of the stars you had all the atoms, but they're just out there in space. I mean, if you look at them and you count the number of atoms that are in, say, a square foot, it's hardly any, right? Mm-hmm. But then after they stick together and they start smashing into each other and they formed the Earth, then they were much closer together. So then you had the evolution of matter, right?
Right.
And then when you had life, all kinds of new compounds came with the evolution of matter, because they were all jammed in and there was pressure and heat. And then you had life, and life started creating all kinds of different matter. So in some ways, it's, you're looking at the evolution of matter to us, right?
Yeah.
And how that matter itself evolved in many ways.
Sharika Davis just said, distilling is such a skill and it takes time to do it and more time to make it fun and vivid. And I always think of alcohol when I think about distilling, but if you think about it, right? So the universe was this giant, swirling, hot, cold, cooling, heating vat, right? We were distilled into people in much the same way. Like, it just all kind of makes sense with the whole cocktail theme as well. But you're literally distilling life out of a giant soup context of cosmos. I don't know. Maybe I'm the only one, but I was like, we are literally like refined spirits. Makes me feel good.
I like it.
Mike Breen says, it's amazing that in terms of matter, everything is basically everything else. And yet, in terms of matter, most of everything is nothing. We get real deep on this show.
I had to call a couple physicists, particle physicists, to get my head around this idea that, if you look inside an atom, 99% of it is empty space, right? So, that we're actually almost all just made of empty space. That one took me a long time to really, to really accept. And honestly, I still haven't fully accepted it, but that's what they told me. So I guess on some level it must be true.
Yeah, I was gonna say, did you have moments when you're writing this where you just like stared at your own hands, going like, trying to wrap your brain around it?
I remember when I was young and I was first learning about the fact that like we're all just these little particles moving around. Sorry for my noise. but we were very. And I thought, why can't I walk through walls then? Like I was really distressed. I was like, if I'm just moving particles and those are just moving particles, like if I hit the wall enough times. Yes, I tried. I was like 11 though, it should work. Theoretically, it should. It doesn't. What's Lexi say? Lexi says, I have nothing is lost, nothing is created, everything is transformed, translated from Lavoisier's chem book. Yeah, that's a good one too.
That's
and
great.
Another very important quote from history, humans as ugly beings of mostly water from Star Trek The Next Generation. we kind of do run the gamut of high literary concept all the way to, not.
Screwball 80s comedies, yeah, the whole gambit.
Screwball 80s, yeah, that's kind of our gamut right there. Another question for you, Sadie Simons wants to know: did Carl Sagan inspire your journey?
I wouldn't say directly, but you probably ask because he turns up so often in the book because he was one of the first, at least, scientists who wrote for the public, but he was really one of the first scientists who was interested in extraterrestrial life, because there was a time when nobody would talk about it at all. And one of the things that I loved was that when we went to the moon for Apollo 11 and we were going to bring things back, that Sagan was one of the people on the scientific committees who was warning about the possibility of microbial life on the moon. And there were a lot of scientists who were very seriously concerned. And it's interesting because of course they built a special building 19 in the Johnson Space Center to receive all of the rocks, right? And they it was many millions of dollars, unbelievable vacuum sealed pulley things that would put the box in, and then it was in behind. You could look at it behind glass in steel boxes that were vacuum sealed, and they had all kinds of crazy evacuation procedures for it. Right. It didn't work because first of all, the boxes weren't fully sealed because they were too hard to seal on the moon in the low gravity or whatever it was. So in the space capsules, when the astronauts were coming back, right, with their space suits or space helmets off, their faces were streaked with this moon dust. And then when they opened the capsule door, of course it all escaped into the atmosphere, into the water. But we're going to have that problem when we retrieve things from Mars as well. And people are again going to be talking about both, how to keep things from being contaminated here, but also about whether we could be bringing anything back that we don't want to wipe us all out.
Yeah, I've been fascinated for a long time about the concept of deep water. This is water that's not in our ecosystem, that's so far down in pockets that it's not actually circulating anywhere. And there was a while ago, one of the cities that was kind of running short on water was like, well, why don't we just take this water? And I was like, that almost as little about that as you do what's on the surface of Mars. Like, actually, maybe less. Just throw that into the ecosystem. For similar reasons, like we are not used to thinking in terms of this very, very small, for one thing. Like it's just not, even the dust that you see on the astronauts, as you point out, the streaky dust, the dust wasn't even really the problem. It was what was tiny, tiny, tiny things in the dust. And I think our brains just struggle to get at that level. And again, another kudos to you, because I think the book does help us to see at that level. And it is not easy to do. We have hit the midpoint of our show. We still have some other questions to ask as well, but it is time for a musical interlude. So you've seen your Bang Dust cocktail, and now it is time for you to see the music that has been developed as a result of your amazing book. So I give you Susan White.
Okay, let's talk about the patriarchy. Taylor Swift and science. You heard it said before, and if you've read the book, you know that we are all made of the same very small particles. You and me, this water here, the sky, The light, the air, we are all star stuff, some people call it. Carl Sagan may have said it. And of course, how that works is a star must die. Gravity pulls everything together, contracts everything, which creates a shit ton more heat and energy, causing the particles to move more rapidly and collide, forming new, heavier particles. For particles heavier than iron, it requires another star death. Again, gravity takes over, pulls everything together, contracts so much heat and energy. There's an explosion of the largest magnitude in the universe called a supernova. And within that, all the heavier, 77 heavier, I believe, elements are created. Well, maybe some of them are man-made. So my theory is that similar to how a star's cycles of life and death create new elements, the patriarchy is harnessing the power generated by a gazillion girls screaming in unison Taylor Swift's lyrics to create a brand new element, Swiftium. These girls of the patriarchy are at a kind of death. They're at the end of their childhoods. Childhoods where they experience a global pandemic, and perhaps after an event as traumatic as that, one is left screaming for normalcy, a stability, a normal so stable that it wouldn't be threatened by differing opinions. A stability so stable, it welcomes new ideas, creativity, vulnerability. And these are the qualities of the brand new element being forged in the fiery core of the patriarchy. I think it's plausible. Granted, my knowledge of Taylor Swift and her music is scanty at best. She seems, not very counterculture at all. She seems very super normcore. A lot of her songs seem to be about breakups where she feels her feelings, but she's okay in the end. And maybe that is what these girls at the end of their childhoods are burning for, to be okay. So Swiftium brings with it a level of stability that provides a platform that supports things that previously never had a chance. Things like communism, socialism, the equitable redistribution of resources on the planet. Swiftium brings with it a stability that supports levels of human decency never before imagined. Or perhaps imagined only in our wildest utopian dreams. 1 to 1 is the atomic number. Added up together, it equals 4. 4, numerologically, it represents practicality, security, groundedness. Wild stability, get heavy. Heavy enough to be free, get heavy. Flagrant human decency, get heavy. Are you ready for the patriarchy? Get heavy. What it takes is the end to make something more. Bye-bye, patriarchy, hello, normal galore. Normal like no one has ever seen before. Made with energy liberated from the core of girls screaming in unison makes a new element. Just when you think it's all over, there's the supernova. The supernova. And the end is the beginning, as the end is the beginning, as the end is the beginning, is the end. A Swiftium for the new equilibrium. Swiftium with medium is premium. Swiftium will short drift, leave you adrift. A new heavy steady, so the live will be swift. A Swiftium for the new equilibrium. Swiftium with medium is premium. Swiftium will short drift, leave you adrift. The new heavy steady, so the live will be swift. Unified screams at the girls with the end of the childhood dreams for a world with stability that doesn't need an epidural. Cause the heavy is steady, cutting it like a machete with human decency like no one has ever seen. A Swiftium for the new equilibrium. Swiftium with medium is premium. Swiftium will short shrift, leave you adrift. The new heavy is steady, so the live will be swift. A Swiftium with a new equilibrium. Swiftium with medium is premium. Swiftium will short shrift, leave you adrift. New heavy is steady, so the live will be swift. A Swiftium, get heavy. Swiftium, get heavy. possible.
Wow.
No, right?
I have to say, I did not see that coming.
No. So that's Susan Huang for you. And now
Wow.
forever, Dan Levitt's book and Taylor Swift will go together in our minds. You know,
Wow.
I'm just saying, we're just waiting for you to pack a house. You know, Taylor Swift could like introduce your new book. That would be awesome.
You should send her the song and the book. That would be so cool. That music was beautiful, by the way. And I have to say, she gave me an idea that I'd never really thought about, which is I started to choke up when she said, for us to be here, stars had to die.
Yeah.
Just, I'd never thought of it like that. And I started, yeah.
It's beautiful. Her songs, she does this to us every time. Susan Huang, who's amazing, she actually runs the Bushwick Book Club out of Brooklyn, New York, which I've been part of. And every time she does this, like you're kind of on this journey and you're like, I wonder where, oh, I didn't know that's where we were going, you know, and it's just beautiful. I mean, she's just got an amazing voice too. And she does all of her, all her lyrics, and she does it all as a one woman show. It's really
The
great.
harmonies and everything. I'm sure she laid down those tracks. Yeah.
She lays those down. Yeah. And she does the beatboxing sometimes. It's great. For any of you who arrived late, this is Wallace greeting us all here this evening, our no longer feral. He's in love with Darwin, so I guess we sort of have two little voids as our mascots now. So anyway, that was so much fun. I have a couple more questions that I want to get to because they're equally like fantastic questions, and I have so many questions for you myself. But I have to also make room because Davey has a special quiz for you.
We do like to quiz the author on this show.
Okay.
Yeah, we always quiz the author, and Davey's quizzes are something else. So,
although I'll say this was another book where, I mean, it was like, what do I quiz about? Comets? I mean, asteroids? Do I go to? I mean, there's so many possibilities.
Movies, you know, it's so
covered
hard to know.
So much topics. Yeah.
Sharon, who I met in person, she asked, "Who is your favorite scientist featured in the book?" Because there's a lot of them.
That's so hard to answer because there are so many. I mean, in some way, I love Peter Mitchell, who went off to do his research when he couldn't take the criticism of his work anymore. He was rich. He bought an English manor in the countryside, built a laboratory, funded his research using his proceeds from his prize dairy cows, among other things. But the other one that I would say is one of my favorites, just because I got to talk to him and it was so much fun to talk to him, was the organic chemist Gunther Wachterhauser, who's an origin of life guy. He was really the first person after they discovered hydrothermal vents at the bottom of the ocean. He was really the first scientist to come up with a very specific chemical explanation of how life might have arisen there. And he was just a hoot, I mean, I just loved it. The favorite part of my conversation was when I asked him, because he was actually a patent lawyer who became originally an organic chemist. He came up with these ideas about the origin of life, and he was afraid that he was going to be criticized. Who are you? And some people were fine with it, but there were a lot of people who did criticize him. And I asked him, well, these people came at you really hot and heavy. Weren't you bothered by that? And he said, well, no, because that's what science is about. That's how science works. You won't have science if you don't have disagreement. And by the way, think about what I was doing to them. In other words, completely eviscerating their positions.
Yeah, that's true.
So how did you acquire all the scientists in the book? Did one research topic kind of lead you to the next scientist? Like, how did you kind of put together your roster for the book? I had this, each chapter has a sort of an organization, it has a question that it answers. How did we learn what our bodies are made of? Or how do we learn how Earth arose? Or how do we learn how water got here? So with that question, then I went and tried to find of course, for any of these, there's so many people that I could have chosen, but I tried to find the ones that were the most critical, the most important, and sometimes, ones that also had really fun stories.
But in most cases, the people who are the most critically important also turned out to have really fun stories. So it just worked out.
Nice.
It's just wonderful. I mean, I love the way books come together like that. It's so good.
Sure.
Who amongst us
Yeah.
does not want to disappear into the English countryside in our own manner? Well, yeah, me too, all the time. Brian mentioned that Einstein was a patent clerk. It's very cool.
Yeah, apparently that's a launching pad for a good scientific career.
That's right. Yeah, that's right.
Rebecca
Dr.
says it's
Hauser.
amazing who will. Oh, Rebecca says it's amazing who will talk to you if you just ask nice.
As a producer, a TV producer, I've been in that position that you authors find yourself in all the time. And most of the time, Rebecca, yes. And then there will be those people out of nowhere that it's like, that just won't, for no good reason. I'm like, you sure I'm giving you free publicity here? It doesn't cost you anything. Like, you sure you don't want to just talk to me? Okay.
Yeah, it is always kind of interesting. Oh, patent clerking Shriek is like, know your rivals. I have cats named Wallace and Darwin, so yeah, know your rivals. Leanne asks another question here. She says, can you tell us about your documentary films and why you pursue films as well? Well, you first pursued films before books.
Yeah. Well, I studied science in college. I was a science teacher, and I've just always loved science. And so I ended up going into documentary filmmaking, but wanting to produce science documentaries, which I ended up doing. And it's just, that was wonderful because I got to travel all over the world, interview all kinds of people. I interviewed Stephen Hawking, for Discovery Channel. I went to Malaysia and Japan and many other countries for my thing. So it was just fun. And but for me, what's equally fun is trying to figure out how to take the science and tell it in a way that people are actually not going to turn the channel or are going to read the book. And so so that was the fun for me of writing the book, is trying to figure out how I could tell it in a way that people would enjoy.
I think too, there's an element there's an element of salesmanship that comes with science, or there needs to be, because it's just a very people do not always accept what they don't understand, and science can be hard to understand. And so I think, you do sort of have to sell it. I mean, each new discovery kind of needs its own little marketing team almost.
Yeah.
And so, I think TV is such a difficult market. I've been on documentary films myself. I've never run one. I've never had the opportunity to build one. I want to, though, if you ever want a colleague in arms. But there's so many moving parts, and it's really, really difficult to get anything like that made. And you do have to think about audience and sales in a way that I'm not sure scientists themselves have to, but maybe they should. Do you think they should?
Well, I think they should do more they should learn how to tell their stories in a more engaging way for the public. And yeah, I mean, I've been doing this a long time. And when I start, 20 years ago or longer, there were not very many, other than Carl Sagan. And, there were very few people who did that well. And it was really looked down on. Nowadays, with podcasts and YouTube and so on, people are really doing it. But you mentioned something else that I appreciated a lot more when I wrote the book, which is that scientists have to go out and sell their ideas to their colleagues. And, so many times that came up in researching the book, and not just granting agencies. Snowball Earth, for instance, the idea that the Earth was completely covered by a kilometer of ice, right? Not only did they have to have the evidence, but, basically these guys had to go out and go on the lecture circuit and go around the country and talk about it and talk about it and talk about it. And gradually this thing that, seems like so weird and bizarre, people will start taking more seriously. But if you don't do that as a scientist, even among your own community, your colleagues, then, the more radical ideas are much more likely to be brushed off. Or, there were people in like Avery in Oswald Avery in my book. He was the first person to really show that heredity was caused by DNA and rather than proteins. For like 40 years before that, almost everybody believed that proteins transmitted heredity. And he was the first person to actually find experimental evidence. But then he titled his paper, results of pneumococcal da. And that's one of the reasons why there were a limited number of people who took it seriously. It wasn't the only reason, but it was one of them. So you really have to do that as a scientist as well.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and we think about, and we're just talking about concepts that are hard to grasp. Then you take something like global warming, where you have people actively thwarting scientific information, actively putting out misinformation. And, you have to be better than they are. And they are often very well funded in what they do. And so it's a race. And I also think, I was just talking about this the day before yesterday with Mark, about how things you hear when you're a kid, it's really hard to shake that in some people. They're like, well, the Farmer's Almanac. I was trying to explain to an elder relative that the Farmer's Almanac was accurate because it was using accumulated data to sort of work out averages and cycles, and that gets thrown out the window when there's climate change, right? Because everything is very different now. And they said, I don't even know how accurate it ever was, actually, but this was just the line of argument. And they were like, well, when I was a kid, I'm like, that's the point. Things are different.
Yeah.
But I think it's very hard to shake some of those they say kind of things. Well, I was always told. And science changes, and people really struggle to accept that too. They're like, no, I was told this was the science. We can't have new science. Science can't evolve. It's frustrating. It's frustrating because we have this concept of science as though it is some kind of nailed down hard tack facts, when in fact science is a series of questions that you try to answer.
Yeah, that's right, and it is partly the way our brains work. I talked to one
planet,
again, an origin of life theorist who was pretty bitter that he wasn't getting the funding that he thought his theory should, because the other parties had all been taught by the guy who had come up with the other theory, right? And they were taught that in school, and so that's what they came to believe, and nothing was going to shake it from them. And there's a bit of an analogy there that when you're younger, right, you learn things like your parents are the perfect people in the world. It's really hard to shake some things just because you've been exposed to them so long, and they were so foundational when you were young.
Yeah, well, and Mike Breen was talking. He says, I once had a Yellowstone tourist claiming that Old Faithful geyser went and erupted every hour on the hour because he remembered it from visiting in his childhood.
Yeah.
It is. Well, and Kristen Meston brings up too. She says, I'm blown away by some of the things that I was taught were scientific truths, which were only found out months, years before it was being taught, and some of them are no longer true. And I think truth is such an interesting word. Science is bigger and more interesting than that. Frankly, it's not a. I think people think that it's a downside of science when it's actually the upside of scientific inquiry. So knowing that we're getting close to time here, I'm going to turn over the reins to the wild madcap adventures of Davy's quiz.
I like that conversation we were having at the end there. Yeah, I absolutely believe this is scientific fact until someone disproves it. Then I'll change my mind. So like I said, your book went through so many stages of the galaxy and life, and I just there were so many things that I thought of for quizzes along the way, and then we got to the end of the book, and you started to talk a little bit at the end of the book about longevity and how long these things can last, and it got me thinking that we should maybe do a quiz about the end of things, and I'm calling this quiz "Young at Heart." It's about some of the oldest animals, people ever in the history of the world. So we're going to start with, I believe it's a French name. I believe it's pronounced, I'm going to say Jean, but I'm guessing there's a French pronunciation that's much fancier than Jean. But Jean-Louis Calment is considered to be the oldest verified person in the history of the world, having lived for 122 years and 164 days. She was born in 1875 and died on August 4th, 1997. She had many secrets to her longevity, but what did she have every morning for breakfast? Was it A, a pile of bacon, stack of pancakes, and orange juice? Was it B, high-fiber cereal with almond milk and a cafe mocha? Or C, coffee with milk and rusks?
Might need to be known what rusks are.
Everybody knows rusks, don't they?
What are rusks? I've never heard of them.
Apparently, it's a double toasted biscuit that people like having for breakfast.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right.
A rusk.
It's basically
Well-
a little breakfast biscuit.
I'm not sure I know what the right answer is, but I'm going to go with the answer that I would like to be right. And that obviously is A,
Hey.
pile of bacon, steak of pancakes, and OJ. And one reason is my grandfather lived to be 101. And
Wow.
I can tell you, he, all of his life, he was from Germany originally. He drank a lot of alcohol and, his daily schnapps, right? And he also, I'm sure, had plenty of ham. So I'm going to go with A.
A. Okay, Randy Trent is also going with A. Sadie's saying it might be C here. I think the rusks have got to go in there. Rebecca Gibson is complaining, Davey. She's like, how do you suddenly hate us? This one's hard. But she's going with A. Kristen is saying rusk is like, what is that?
Zwieback
toast? That you give to teething
Yeah,
babies.
you
Of course you know what it is.
teething babies, but some people eat them for breakfast. Yeah.
Wow. Okay. Sharon's going with C.
I will
right.
say, going on the train of thought of like bad behaviors, but still living to be over 100 years old, she did smoke. Like, she was like, "Oh, I only have a cigarette after a meal or something like that." Like, she thought like there was some science to it where she could manage it, but apparently she's 122 years old and still smoking cigarettes. But
Smoking cigarettes. All right.
the
We got a
answer
couple
is-
C's, couple A's.
The answer is yes, C. Rusk
C,
maybe was the
rusk.
giveaway.
Oh.
Coffee with milk and
Oh,
rusk.
wow.
There you go. There's an
Mike
image of the little biscuits.
Mike Breen says, I'm going with C, and assuming that the Rusk Industrial Complex has been hiding their life elongating properties.
Exactly, right? Who knew this was the perfect breakfast to live over 100 years old? All right. We'll see if this one's slightly easier or not. This one's more fair, at least. You've heard of these three things. One of the longest living animals is the Aldabra giant tortoise. Currently, one named Jonathan is 191 years old and is cared for by a veterinarian. I did hear in the article I was reading that some claim that there's one over 200 years old. Aldabra giant tortoises are native to the Seychelles Islands, which are in which ocean? A, the Pacific Ocean, B, the Indian Ocean, or C, the Atlantic Ocean. And if I mispronounced anything in there, I apologize.
My ignorance of geography, but is it B, the Indian Ocean?
Oh, Sharik is going B. Kristen loves Jonathan. Who doesn't, right?
That's not
Rebecca's
necessarily a
going-
picture of Jonathan. It's just an Aldabra giant tortoise.
Lots of people going with B here. Yeah, I was going to say, I think it's Seychelles.
Seychelles, there we go.
Yeah. Seychelles by the
answer
seashore.
The answer is yes, B, the Indian Ocean. It's
All right.
just north of Madagascar there in the Indian Ocean, and some of those. You think it's mind-boggling how many tiny atoms there are in our universe, right? Just how many tiny islands there are in the world is
That's the
mind-boggling.
truth. Mark and I stayed at Punta Cana, and like for a long time, you were like, "Well, where is that?" And I was like, "In the ocean." It's in the Dominican Republic, as it turns out, which is attached to Haiti. Now I know.
Oh, Sadie with some valuable information here.
Oh yeah, I hear Jonathan still gets his groove on with the lady tortoises, so there's a bunch of little Jonathans out there. I don't know why you owe this to Patrick O'Brien. I missed what you did. Oh, the Indian Ocean. Got it.
I will jumping back a question. I will say that for Jean-Louise Calment, there is some possible controversy out there because she has outlived her daughter and her grandchild, which is crazy. There's actually a lot of crazy facts about her life. It turns out she married a rich husband and didn't really work and just did leisure activities all day. Maybe that's why she lived 122.
That sounds like a secret right there.
That might help.
Her daughter died maybe from a disease or something at age 34, and people think that maybe Jean-Louise Clement actually died, and the daughter just assumed her identity for financial reasons. So maybe she's not actually 122. Maybe she's actually 99 years old, and it's actually the daughter posing as That's a theory that's been thrown
Oh.
out there, but this is they have verified. They believe from census data and everything. This actually is her. I know.
That's an even better story, actually. I'm gonna put that in a mystery novel.
All right, last question. Glass sponges are considered the oldest animal, yes, animal on Earth. Scientists suggest that they can live for a maximum of how many years? Is it A, 5,000 years, B, 10,000 years, or C, 15,000 years?
Never even heard of a glass sponge. I'm gonna have to go look this up now.
Yes,
Ooh.
they are considered part of the animal kingdom.
Wow. I have no idea. I'm going to have to go with C just because it's most impressive, but that's a total toss-up.
Wow, yeah. I'm over here in the we're still having conspiracy talk over here in the side chat. Gosh. I mean, wow. Sharika says A, and I think I'm going to go with B. They're carnivorous also. Rebecca, you hiding out on us? You just have this random information about glass sponges?
Actually, am I allowed to change my vote? I think I would go with B. C just seems too long. There's something about that number. Okay. Yeah, it seems.
We've got a couple votes for C just because it's fun.
That's the psychology of it, right, Rebecca? Right. That B split the difference. That's the answer.
Kristen says yes, right. But how frequently are all of their atoms replaced? Important question.
That's a good question.
The answer is C. They theorized they can live up to 15,000 years. They found like a skeleton of one that they estimated was 11,000 years old. Yeah, they can reach up to 15,000 years.
So these things have skeletons? How?
I don't know. Again, maybe Rebecca knows. She knows they're carnivorous. Maybe she can help us out there.
I ain't got no.
Let's see. I'll look for the information on glass sponges while we finish up the interview here. But thank you, Dan. Thank you for playing that kind of thing.
Davey's like, we'll be talking about something, and all of a sudden just video will pop up. Davey will have found it and put it in the chat. He's very good at that. So I lost it.
They're known for large, complex, glass-like skeletons. Spend their lives attached to hard surfaces, filtering water to consume bacteria and plankton. Their body structure provides a habitat for other animal species like small crustaceans.
Wow.
So a life of leisure is what you're telling me. So this is how we do it. We just attach to a rock. Okay, I've lost my place now. I had things queued up and now I've lost them.
Yeah, it's all quiz information now.
That was an excellent quiz, by the way.
Thank you.
Wasn't that great? His quiz
that was a good one.
Thank you.
Here's a question. This gets back to this is another one from Leanne. So atoms, they had a beginning. Everything had a beginning, and we've had Katie Mack on here before, so we all pretty sure there's going to be an end. What's the death of atoms like? Is that something you've thought about?
So there's the question whether the universe is going to expand forever, or whether it's going to come back in the big crunch.
Right.
Right. Yeah. Well, if it expands forever and everything inflation continues or the expansion at least continues, and there's a point at which we can't see any stars or other planets, and eventually everything just becomes long wavelengths. Mm-hmm. So yeah, at a certain point, then goodbye to atoms. But I don't exactly know what happens if we have the big crunch. What happens to atoms in that case?
I think that Goodbye to Atoms should be the first song, Davey, in your band called Bang Dust in Meat Jackets. Yes. I hope you're taking notes.
I've taken. Oh man, I had another band name. I'm going to pull up really quick before the show ends because you had another great line in there, but that's a good one.
Sharon was saying Katie for the existential dread because for real. Joanne wanted to know if dark matter is brought into all of this or not, because that's another thing that Katie brought up in her show with us is the empty space and the dark matter. It's like the anti-things. Like it's the anti-thingness of those things. It's really, really difficult to even think about.
Yeah, the dark matter, I'm afraid I can't speak to it all. I don't understand what it is, and actually nobody does. So.
It's literally dark.
That's right.
How many things in this book were you like, I can't explain it to you. That's just what I was, that's what I learned, what I was told. I can't.
what I was told.
Yeah.
You know what though? It's funny because one of my friends is a medieval historian, and she gets really mad when people say Dark Ages, thinking that people were less intelligent or less enlightened or whatever. She's like, it's dark because we don't know enough about it, and I feel like dark matter should be called that because we don't know enough about it.
But that's why it's called that. Yeah, exactly. That's exactly why they named it that. Yeah.
I love it. Mike Breen says though, when we arrive at the death of Adam,
yeah,
we can walk through walls, and presumably we'll all just be long wavelengths, and we'll just kind of weave along.
The Flash can do it. It's all about vibration. That's how he does it.
Give me enough coffee, I'll give it another try, I suppose. What was the other band name that you said you pulled up?
Panspermia. Tell me they're not headlining.
It's good. Popular concept.
Yeah.
Popular concept, yes. Well, it has been, it's already 8:00, and this is the way it always goes on our show, is that, we try to stick to an hour, and invariably we have the tendency to want to go over. But it has been an absolute joy having you here. You said you have another book that you are presently working on. Can you tell us about it yet, or is that still a no-no?
It's going to be about the brain, and I can't tell you a lot more than that because I'm still working it out. But I'm taking a deep dive into the brain.
Yeah,
No,
I was just going to say, I did the head transplant book, and I learned an awful lot about brains with that one.
Ooh, that's fun.
Yeah. The head transplants, it started off being about the brain, so there was a lot of brain stuff. Then it moved on to the head transplant stuff, and it was about heads, and then it was about monkey heads, and so it got off track a little bit, but there was a lot of brain stuff. I love brain stuff. So you should totally send that my way when it comes around again, because we'll be back on.
Okay, well, I'm going to look.
What the book is, by the way. It's The Year of Living Constitutionally. That's the book that I just did that we're going to have a podcast on. Phew, came back around.
I'm going to look up the head transplant book tomorrow. I mean that's such a great description. So now I'm all ears.
Mr. Humble and Dr. Butcher, it's called.
Okay.
Such an amazing book, says Kristen Meston. To spur all of these discussions, thank you for writing it, Dan. Love brain stuff, says Amanda. We'd love to have you back. Oh, it's AJ Jacobs. Thank you, Jennifer. AJ Jacobs is who we're having for the Year of Living Constitutionally in the podcast in May to talk about stuff and things, since it's an election year. But this, as always, I'm so glad all of you could be here. I'm so glad you could be here, Dan, because this is so up our street, this kind of book. We love brains. We'd love to have you back. Davey, thank you for being here with all of the with all the Quizless knowledge. It's meaty. It was very meaty today. Meat and bang dust. We've got a lot of good words happening here this evening. Any last words for our peculiars, Dan?
May your dust continue to inspire awe. How's that?
May your dust continue to inspire awe. There's your album title, Davey. We're completely sewn up. Thank you so much for joining us.
Gotta learn how to play instruments, and we're all set.
Well, exactly. I have playing the saxophone in our intro. Thank you once again for joining us at a place where, if you're weird, you're family.
You got the blue bottle blues when you wake up in the night. Don't make a big mistake, 'cause you can never make it right. When you reach out for the vial, feel the ridges in the glass. It's a matter of survival, baby, better watch your back. There is no antidote. There is no antidote. There is no antidote. There is no